This video is to introduce you all to RStudio, specifically the cloud version, and R Markdown within RStudio. So let's get started. So now we should be looking at just a browser screen of mine, and I'm in a new tab, and I want to type RStudio.cloud. So if you have the RStudio and downloaded it to your computer, you would sign into your RStudio that way. But the cloud is a free account, so you're going to have to get started for free. Free accounts allow you to do enough projects in your workspace for a semester. If you are doing more industrial work, and if you're planning on doing tons and tons of projects, you will then need to upgrade to a paid account. And there are plenty of discount options if you do end up upgrading because you want to use this more. Or again, if you download the free RStudio onto your computer, then you don't have to worry about having an account at all. The pros of us using the cloud is that, well, typically when classes are not all online, now that we're all online, you'll always be on your own computer. But when we're traveling back and forth to campus, we would be able to pull up our projects on a computer and not necessarily always have to bring our own. So RStudio.cloud is nice in the way that it's easily accessible. Plus, I will be setting up a workspace for all of us to put our projects in so that if you have questions and you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot get this error out of my code, I could pop into your project, your actual RStudio environment, and take a look at what you've done and maybe help you out with your errors that you might be getting. So I'm going to log in. Now I set up my RStudio Cloud account through my Google Gmail. I just found that to be the easiest way. So feel free to do that as well. When you get into your account, you are going to see not all this. Everything's going to be blank for you guys. My free account, I have maxed out on projects and workspaces, which is why I have to upgrade my account to the instructor account, which I'm in the process of doing. Eventually, we will have a workspace that you guys will all be invited to, and it will look like this one, where all you guys, all your projects will be in here, and I will be able to pop in and out so that I can help when you guys get stuck. So when you get to your workspace, you're going to want to click on New Project. I don't have any room for new projects, so I have this already started project that I just cleared out so that we could use today. Oh, okay. So I guess it's not completely clear. So let me clean it out so it looks like what it would look like if I did not already have stuff in here. Okay. So when we're in the workspace, when we first get in here, we typically don't see anything. Everything will be blank because you haven't done anything yet. This is your console window. In your console window is where you'll be able to read in files, read packages in that you need, and so on. When we are working in an R Markdown file, which I'll show you in a moment, a fourth pane will pop up above here. This is your environment, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And this is your main window where you're going to start off, where you're going to upload your files, where you can say what packages you need to install, which is the easiest place for you to install packages is in this window, because you don't actually have to write the code for it. If you want to title your project so that in your workspace you'd be able to see the project, I will say this is Learning RStudio. Okay, so now when I go in my workspace, it'll actually be labeled Learning RStudio instead of untitled. Now, right now, I want to show you guys how to upload your COVID-19 data set for your project coming up this week. You will go to Upload. You're going to go to Choose File. Now, this means that you've already downloaded it from the website, the DataQuest website. So you have to click the link where they tell you to. It says available here for download, and it downloads as a CSV file. So CSV stands for comma separated variables. If you try to open it as a CSV file, not an Excel file, it's very difficult to read, and I'll show you. I'm going to click OK. So now in my files, I should see COVID-19. If I click on COVID-19 down here in my file window and ask to view file, you'll see it as a comma separated variable file. So again, I'm looking at this and blah, that hurts my eyes to look at. It's not very pretty. You guys are used to seeing data in a spreadsheet format. So let's bring our, sorry, let me show you what I did. Let's bring our file into our environment so that we can see it as a spreadsheet. So I hit this little open folder button, load my workspace, and I'm going to select my COVID-19 file and click open. Okay, now I'm coming down here. What I'm looking at is in my console. My console says that I tried to load my project and there was an error in loading it. It's saying my file may be corrupt. Well, that sucks. Interesting. I just did this and it worked just fine. Well, this is always going to happen where we have some unexpected things come up. Let's see if we can get something else uploaded. Let's see. Let's try to import it through Excel. Okay, so notice that it gave me a pop-up window asking me if I wanted to update the file, the Excel reader. So if a package is being used to import anything, then it will automatically prompt you. So we have to wait for it to go through its cycle. That's what's great about this bottom left window is it shows you that it's working and it says, oh, this was successfully installed. Great. So I'm going to go. I just did that. Come on, RStudio. Okay. Why am I having so many issues? Package reader was installed. You know what? It looks like I need to update my packages. So why don't we do it together? Because who knows, this might happen to you. And this is why I'm doing this live so that I'm recording it live. I didn't prep this. And the reason why was because if I came into any snags, which happens almost every time we try to do something, part of being a data scientist, programming in general, is being able to debug what the heck it's telling you to do. So my pop-up window kept telling me that I need to update a package. So I went down here, I went to Packages tab, and I'm just going to update them all. Select all and install updates. So this might, I don't know how long this is going to take, but what's great is that if you run into some of the similar problems, now you see that it's not just a perfect, it's not always a perfect flowing. My goodness, I feel like I can't talk today. Nothing doesn't always work out perfectly. That's what I'm trying to say. So when we run into errors, we just have to try to follow the error messages and see how far we get. Sometimes we get stuck, and there are ways and locations on the internet for us to go to ask questions for when we get stuck. So if we follow every error message and we feel like we've done everything the error messages were telling us to do to fix our problems and it's still not working, then you can go to the Slack channel, R for Data Science Slack channel. All these resources are posted in our course in our Blackboard shell. That is one of the best ways. I have gotten really great help from the data scientists who pulled office hours on there for when we get stuck. And there's also other communities inside of um, the R community where they would love to help you when you get stuck. So that's something. Oh, this is good to show you. So when the counsel's working, sometimes you don't know when is it done. It looks like it's done. It says done, but there's a stop sign here. The stop sign's telling you that it is still working on what you last asked it to do. So be patient with RStudio. Sometimes it looks like nothing's happening and you're just sitting here like, can I do something now? Pay attention to this stop sign. If this stop sign is still up, it means that it is still working on the last task you asked it to do, and you should wait until the stop sign is no longer there to know that you are not going to overload the system and ask it to do too many things at once. Okay, the larger the task you ask a platform like this to do, the longer it will take for it to compile your code. So I tried doing one very large project one time, and it took hours for it to actually run my code. And I mean, the first time I did it, I thought something was wrong because it just wasn't working. But then I did some research. I went on the Slack channel and I asked, is it normal for it to sometimes take hours to run code? And because I'm using a cloud-based, the server is shared amongst the world, and yeah, depending, sometimes the server is really busy, and they said yes, it does sometimes take quite a long time to run some code, especially on the cloud, a free cloud at that. So I'm still going to wait for this console to complete its updates. It take a while because there's quite a few updates. I haven't done this in a while. Most likely when you open your new account, you should be fully updated when you first sign in. So, but if not, hey, now you know how to update packages all at once. So we're just going to hang out here and we're going to wait for that to finish before I can move on. Still waiting. Oh, there we go. Okay. So notice that my stop sign has now disappeared. So we are good to go. Hopefully we'll find out. Let's now see if we can import the COVID-19 dataset. It's still giving me an error. My goodness, let's try it this way. Reinstall it. Okay, well, let's go to packages. It's telling me that readr is not installed. Okay, so let's install readr. So I went to import, I went to packages, install, and I typed in the name of the package I need, which is readr, and I'm going to hit install, and I see it working down here. Again, there's the stop sign, meaning although it looks like it's not working, it was still working. And now it should be installed. So let's try this again. I'm clicking COVID-19. I'm clicking import dataset. Okay, this is just not working. Well, that's disappointing. Okay, so I have no idea what is going on with my darn account, but I'm just going to jump over to a different project, one that I made last year. Fortunately, I'm not doing this from scratch, which was my intention. I mean, I'll redo this from scratch, but we'll use a different data set that I already have uploaded in here. Let me clear this out. Clear. Okay, so let me click out of here. So here we are. I'm in a different one of my projects. Hopefully this one is a little smoother. We have high school completion crime rate is a data set that I've uploaded as a CSV file, which I've showed you how to do. We go to upload and you find it, you browse your computer, you find the file, which for you guys would be the COVID-19 file, and it should show up here. Now we should be able to import our CSV file into our environment. Maybe. Okay, let's do it this way. So I'm down here, I click on my file, I click on import dataset, and you'll see that it gives me a preview of what it looks like as a spreadsheet. And our studio is crashing on me today. This is pleasant. We're waiting. I usually don't have this many issues with the cloud, although I have to say, with free accounts, it's not unusual for the cloud to crash because you are on a free shared server. So this would not be the first time that I've experienced a lot of issues. But I have to say, the majority of the times this thing works great. Okay, so now I can see it as an Excel sheet and I can say import. Success! Yay! Okay, so what's great about, again, doing this live and not preempted, not done ahead of time, is that if I run into problems, I want you to see that there are problems. Everything doesn't always work perfect, as we've just demonstrated, and that it's not, you just don't give up. You go start a different project. I'm assuming there must be something wrong. Those were old projects that I'm using. They weren't a brand new project, so I don't even know how old that project was. It might have been so old that nothing was updated inside of the environment, and that's why it was crashing or wasn't working for me. So I went to this newer environment, one that I've created last year, and the updates must be working much better in this environment. You guys really shouldn't have those same setup issues because, again, you're just starting your account now, so everything should be up to date when you first sign in. Okay, now we have our 4 panes. So you can see that once I've put it into my environment, I can now see the data set not as crazy like that CSV file. Again, I'll show you if I view the file, notice it starts opening up different tabs. The CSV file, extremely difficult to read, but we have this file here where we can easily read, okay, there's states in this data set, there's high school completion numbers, there's crime rate per 100,000, and so on. So being able to see the names of the variables is really helpful. Right now, I can see that these variables have spaces in them, which is not preferred in R. When you're doing variable names, you should use underscores instead of spaces because then it's much easier to recall your variable. When there are spaces, we are going to have to use backticks for R to read the variable name, knowing that there are spaces inside of the name, or it will not be able to read the variable if there are spaces. Okay, so now we have our window here, which is where we'll be able to view data sets or open our Markdown file, which we're going to do next. We have our console, which gives you pretty much a record of everything that you've done so far. So notice that when I wanted to read in a file, it automatically did the library code for me that you guys are learning about. So it said, okay, you're going to need the package reader. And then it did all the code right here. So it read in and it read it in and it kept it the same name. It's not going to change the name unless we do, which we will. And we will add this code into our R Markdown file because you're going to want to read it into the R Markdown file. Right now, it's just read into the RStudio environment. Okay, so sometimes you can learn some coding syntax from this console. So some of the click and point features give you the code. This console gives you the code that was written behind the scenes in order to show you this. And here's what I was talking about. You see these backticks? These backticks are automatically put around the variable name because there are spaces in the variables. So the console automatically knew to do that, and you can learn from the code that's in the console. Now once we upload the data set into this window here, we then click on it and ask it to import the data set into here. We show that the data set is imported here, and if it didn't automatically open a tab, you can just double click it from the environment and it will open a tab for you. All right, I'm going to close out the CSV file because we won't need that. We may need to refer to the actual data set, so I'm going to leave that for us. Let's now go to File. We are going to want to start a new R Markdown file. So let's do a new file. And notice you have a lot of options, okay? So in RStudio, it's not just R that you can code. You can code C language, a language of C, C++, CSS, you can do Java, Python, SQL, and so on. So it's an environment that is multifaceted. You can use several different languages inside of an R Markdown file or any file. Just like when we are coding with Python in one of our future courses, not this course, but the next course that you guys are all going to take, we'll be using Jupyter Notebooks. Or Google Collaborate actually is what we're going to use, a Jupyter Notebook inside of Collaborate, because again, it's cloud-based and free. Well, everything's free about Python and R. So what we really want is an R Markdown file. So I am going to select it. I'm going to get this window. Now in DataQuest, they have a guide that walks you through R Markdown and everything to expect. So when you get that link, you should really click on it. I'll show you what it looks like. So there's a link in your project that says, hey, if you need help with R Markdown, go here. And you'll see that this site gives you screenshots. It has links to where you might get stuck in running the code, chunking code, installing. We don't have to worry about installing because we're using the cloud. It's already in there. If you were using the downloaded RStudio, not the cloud version, then you would have to go through an install process, which is another reason why I prefer the cloud, because it comes with everything already preloaded and I don't have to do any of that loading extra work, which is kind of nice. So I'm going to title this file Learning RStudio, and I'll set the author to Professor Wiggins because I'm going to make this file accessible to you guys with this recording. So I can choose how I want the output it's called knitting the file, which means you're creating a final product. You can knit it as an HTML file, so we can just look at it through a browser. You can knit it as a PDF, or you can knit it as a Word document. So I'm going to choose a PDF. You can change this at any time in the R Markdown file, and I'll show you how to change it. You can also, instead of a document, let's say you were trying to create a presentation. So our Markdown does have slides, sort of like PowerPoint, but maybe not as fancy. Shiny is for interactive applets. So you can create these interactive applets, which we use a lot in data journalism, so that you can interact with the data and kind of like they usually come with graphs with sliders on the axes so that you can play around with the data and see what happens when you make the sample size bigger or smaller and so on. Shiny is not that easy to use. You do need to have different accounts, a different account for that. So stay away from that from now. That's actually not part of this course. Let's stick with document, and I'm going to click OK. So it sets up my untitled R Markdown because I haven't saved it yet. So notice that the first chunk you guys will always see is a title, author, date, and output. So my title is Learning RStudio. Professor Wiggins is the author. It automatically sets the date to today. And the output I chose was PDF_document. If I wanted to change this, I could change the output to HTML, and I could just type HTML_document. So if I wanted to change this to HTML, I would just literally type HTML here instead of PDF. So I could change that at any time that I want. Also, when I knit, knitting means to create your final project. I can always choose a different knit. So I can, if I wanted to just look at it really quick, I usually use HTML because then it just pops up as a browser window. And just to double check that it looks right. Okay, so that's the top. That's just pretty much in a Word document, the very top of the document. If you wanted to put some text in the margin, you would double click at the very top of a Word document to do that. And that's kind of the same thing here. So every R Markdown starts with this little chunk here. Leave that chunk. So what we're going to learn is that these 3 backticks and then these squiggly brackets is how we are starting an R chunk. This document in these lines, a line 11, if I start typing here, this is not going to be R code. This is just letters, just writing, almost like writing in a Word document. It's not going to code anything. In order to code, you need to create these chunks, and you need to see how it creates a gray box. It has settings and it has a play button, which means to run your code. See, run current chunk. Chunking your code is really helpful. So if I just set up this whole thing to be a big gray box where I could code anywhere, the problem with that is when you get errors, the whole chunk is going to be flagged as an error. And it's much more difficult for you to find where you're having issues in the run of your code. So if you chunk your code, like importing certain packages that you need is one chunk. Then reading in your file is another chunk. Then creating a graph is another chunk. Then when the code is broken, you will see just that one chunk highlighted and saying that there's an error, and it's much, much easier, much more concentrated for you to find where the error is. So all these R Markdown files start with giving you a little bit of preview of what can or can't you do. So I am going to delete this stuff because we don't need it. Now, I do want to provide you guys with this cheat sheet. So this is a cheat sheet that I find to be really helpful. It gives you little syntax examples of how to write in R Markdown, and another cheat sheet was that link that I just showed you that you get in DataQuest. This is where this box here I find to be really helpful. When you set up an R chunk, you may want to look at some of these options. So the 2 that I always do is I set message to false and I set warning to false. Because when you knit your file, if you want all of the messaging and warnings that RStudio gives you to be in your document, it's going to be quite cluttered and not so pretty. And I'll show you why I set them to false. Now, echo, if I set echo to false, then I will be hiding my code and only showing the output. So if I was doing a professional presentation and I only wanted the graphs to show, but I didn't want to show my customers all the coding that I did to get that graph, then I would set echo to false in order to hide the code and only show the output. Now for your projects, please do not do anything with echo because I want to see your code. I have to see your code. I don't just want to see your output. But I'll show you what it looks like both ways. So leave this little chunky guy here. And I am going to in some stuff for you that I've already written. So hold on. Okay, so this is just text. So when you do one hashtag mark, this is a title. The more hashtags you have, the smaller the subtitle is. So with one hashtag, learning R Markdown is going to be a large title. And 3 hashtags, this is going to be much more like regular print underneath it. So again, the 1 hashtag, you're going to have a very large title, 2 hashtags smaller, 3 hashtags smaller than that, and so on. So that cheat sheet I just showed you, that was purple. This will be a link when I knit this, and you'll be able to click on it and access that cheat sheet very easily. Literally all I did was Google R Markdown cheat sheet, and it's the first thing that comes up from RStudio. Any packages you need installed, do that in the console pane or in the pane to the bottom right. That's the easiest way to install any packages, again, by going to this packages. And you can see that dplyr is already installed. They're checked. ggplot2, which you guys probably haven't worked with yet. It's how you're going to get your graphs. You'll learn how to do that. Reader is how you are going to be able to read in any files and so on. And again, if you don't have those installed, when you go to do something with it, it will automatically tell you, hey, you forgot to install me. So you will need to activate any packages that you want to use in the file though. So even though my environment, my RStudio environment has these check marks checked off because it is installed in the environment, I still have to call that up in the actual R Markdown file so that the file itself can access those packages. So I'm going to create a chunk. Okay, so 3 back tick marks. The back tick mark is usually the top left corner of your keypad. Notice that RStudio does like to predict what you're going to need. So you started a bracket, it knows you're most likely going to need to close the bracket at some point. So it automatically shows me the closing bracket. So if I just put R here, then I am starting a chunk. Notice the moment I wrote R, I received a settings button to modify my chunk options. I have a run all chunks above, and I have a run just this current chunk. Okay, I like to skip 2 lines and do my 3 backticks so that I'm completing the chunk. Okay, so now below these 3 tick marks are just going to be type like this, where I'm not coding. And inside these tick marks, this space here, which I can keep hitting enter and make the chunk bigger and bigger and bigger, is where I'm actually coding. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to call in any packages we might be using in this session. And we can add to this if we need more, because again, this is my chunk that I want to put all my library commands in. So you guys learned in DataQuest that library is how you're going to call a package. So things that I need the reader package in order to read in a data file. I am going to need the ggplot2 package as well, because I'm going to show you guys a pretty graph just for fun, even though that has nothing to do with your COVID data. But you might find it helpful. You might want to visualize the COVID data, so you can Google some ggplot code. ggplot is actually really easy to use. So I can't remember if I have another one. Let me just, sometimes I don't need them all, but dplyr is typically a package that I use a lot and has a lot of very useful things in it. So when in doubt, I install that one. Okay. So now that I have my chunk where I am installing packages, now let's read in the file. So now again, notice that it's different. The gray chunk is code. The white area is, I'm not coding right now. I am just writing in English so that when I knit the file, it will be like a full directions page for you guys to follow. So I need to set up another chunk. Again, I like to close my chunks so I don't forget. And in this particular chunk, I want to read in my high school completion. It's called High School Completion and Crime Rate. So notice I'm hovering my mouse over it to get the full file name. So I want to read this in, and I'm going to read it in as HS. That's going to be the new name so that I can reference the data set without having to write that all out every time, because that would be a pain in the butt. Do a back arrow, and I'm going to type read_CSV because it's a CSV file. Notice that RStudio is extremely smart. It not only says, hey, I think you're looking for this command, but it also tells you you're going to need the reader package. So if I didn't already put library read R in my little library chunk, then I would know to add it, or I'm going to get an error when I try to run the code. Open parentheses, and then you're going to need your quotes. Now you're going to type the file name exactly. So I have high_school_completion_, I think it was, let me look again, and crime rate. And crime rate. .csv. Don't forget the .csv. Okay, so that should read in my file. Now I want to visualize the data. Again, I am going to open up an R chunk, close the R chunk so I don't forget, and I'm going to create a plot. So I am going to call on ggplot, and I am now going to reference my data set as HS because up here I just relabeled this ugly name as HS. So ggplot on the HS data plus, this is the aesthetics command. So under aesthetics, I am going to label what I want the X and the Y variables to be. So I want the X variable to be, and again, I'm like, what do I want the X variable to be? Go back to your data set and look at what variables you have to choose from. So I'm going to let the X be high school completion, and I want to compare that to the crime rate. So high school completion, and there are spaces, so I'm going to have to use a backtick. So I'm going to do backtick high school completion backtick, comma, y equals, and that variable I'm going to use crime rate, and you do have to include the entire variable name, so it's per 100,000 in parentheses, also with spaces. So crime rate in parentheses per 100,000, end backtick because that's the end of the variable name. Plus, so with ggplot, you just use the pluses like ands, and to make your code, you're going to notice that everybody has their own style with how they code. Some people just code in straight lines, and it's a linear horizontal line forever and ever and ever. It's very highly recommended that you create readable code. So every new thing that you do, you have indentions. Notice I have ggplot, and then I am pressing enter instead of writing aesthetics here and then the plot. It could all be one line. It doesn't have to be an enter. But when I press enter, it indents for me and makes it really easy for me to read. So I highly recommend you guys find what you want your style to be. But remember that whatever you're coding, you're usually coding to share with someone, and it's much easier for another person who hasn't written the code to read if you chunk it in some way. So here's my chunks, which makes it very much easier to read. Okay, so now that I've written a little bit of code, let's now run the code, make sure it actually runs. So let's run all. Make sure I don't get any red. So I'm looking for anything highlighted in red. I successfully have a scatter plot that was produced, so my code worked great. So you can run the code right in this screen, but if you're curious what this document's going to look like as a final product, then you come here to knit, and I'm going to click HTML. I have to name the file first, so that I'm going to name it Learning RStudio. We'll call it Fall 2020 so I know what semester it's from. And I'm going to save the file. So you're going to see that the file name has been saved. Let's see if you can also see what I'm knitting. You can, good. Okay, so now that I've knit the file, now you can see what my final product's going to look like. And when I knit it as a PDF, it's going to look the same thing. It's just not going to be in a browser window. So you can see that, remember though, it's one hashtag, it's a very large, well, this is the very top of the page where you have a title, your name, and the date. But here's the hashtag. Notice the title size, the same as the title size here. So if I didn't like that, if I said, you know what, Learning R Markdown shouldn't be the same size as the title, then I would put 2 hash marks in front of this so that it would be a smaller print. You can see that this is clickable. So I've created a link inside of the sheet so that you can click on this. You can see all my code, and here are all those really annoying, very cluttered warnings and messages. That's what I want to shut off. I want to show you how to shut these off because this doesn't make your report look very pretty. And that's including to me. Now, I don't want to set echo off because that would hide this code. I wouldn't be able to see any of the code that I've written. All of the gray boxes would also disappear. Don't want to do that because I need to grade your stuff. But all these messages here, those are just RStudio messages, and we don't need to read those. That makes it really hard to look at. But I can see all of my code and my outputs. So now let me show you how to turn off those annoying messages. So in my code, in each one of these chunks, I'm going to have to put in message equals false, comma, warning equals false. And again, I'm getting those from that cheat sheet of what do I want to turn off. If I put echo equals false, then my gray boxes of code would also not be visible to a reader. So again, I'm going to go here and I'm going to go message equals false. Notice I don't actually have to type everything. I can start typing warning and I just hit enter. And then I can hit my down arrow and hit enter, which makes your coding so much faster once you get more familiar or more comfortable with it. So message equals false and warning equals false. Let's knit it again and see how much better it looks this time. Okay, so now you can see my code. You can clearly read this worksheet much easier. So I'm talking to you about what you need to do. We read in some packages. Now let's read the file. So now this is how I typed in how to read the file, visualize the data, and I can see my output. So notice all of the error messages and warnings and all the stuff RStudio was communicating with you is now removed from the text, and it's a much more cleaner and easier to read file. Okay, so that is the basics of RStudio for what you need to know right now. I will include this file and this video in our course.